What's up, everybody? Daddy Sports Gamer here. Welcome to the 1989 off-season. We are jumping right into the NBA draft. Here is the draft lottery. Here are the lottery odds, I should say. Now, this gets a little funky because we are in a season where we have two expansion teams joining, and I really don't like the way 2K handles this in real life. In the 1989 NBA season, or 1990 NBA season, and 1989 draft, the Wolves and the Magic picked 10th and 11th. That's what happened in real life, and I'm going to honor that. So you're going to see some results of the lottery. I'll explain to you what I end up doing as we go through it. But and also that Sonics pick that says via San Antonio, that should belong to the Spurs. So I'll also make that fix as well in this video. You'll see that. But yeah, so right now you see the Pacers at 11. Even though the lottery odds had 1 through 9, they add 2 new expansion teams to the draft lottery. I don't like it. I don't like the way they do that. But it's just something that I have to fix. So this is why I like to control all teams in my sim, because of stupid stuff like this that 2K does that I have to fix. So yeah, that 10th pick, that really should be the blah 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 8th pick, maybe. That should belong to the Spurs, because that Spurs pick was supposed to be lottery protected, and 2K is not acknowledging that. But it is interesting to see the Sonics, despite being bad this season, are ending up with 3 picks in a row, which will actually be 2 picks in a row. And I think what will end up happening is they'll have picks 6 and 7, because the Wolves and the Magic will have picks 10 and 11. So again, here's the Nets with the 7th pick, which will really be the 5th pick, and the Suns with the 6th pick, which will really be the 4th pick. I know this is complicated, but this is what happens when 2 expansion teams are added to the mix. So it's just, yeah, it's a bunch of baloney on 2K's part. Yeah, the Wolves. I don't know why they did this. I don't know why 2K did this. I know that when the Raptors and the Grizzlies joined, I know that they had like picks 4 and 5, or maybe it was 3 and 4. But for the 4 expansion teams that were added in the late 80s, they had to pick after the lottery. Jesus Christ, guys. I'm going to let that through because I got assholes in my neighborhood driving fast for no reason. Here's the real top 3, though. We got the Miami Heat picking 3rd. So that's pretty cool. And we got picking 2nd. Let's see who's going to pick 2nd. It'll be, is it going to be the Nuggets? It's actually going to be the Charlotte Hornets with the 2nd pick, which means the number 1 pick will be the Denver Nuggets. And wow, I mean, the Nuggets are on the verge of a rebuild, which I will get to later in this video as we go through the offseason stuff. And I mean, when you get the number 1 pick like this, that definitely signals that you should start the rebuild ASAP. So Alex English and Fat Lever, they're going to be on the outs because the Nuggets, they already have Dan Marley, and then they get the number 1 pick of the draft. They're definitely going to pick the best player available. And yeah, that's going to kickstart the rebuilds. That's pretty cool for the Nuggets. And the Hornets and Heat, they also they got the 2nd and 3rd picks. So it's also pretty interesting. Let's get into the draft. I decided to make a trade, actually. You'll see, and I'll explain myself as we get through the draft. But I hope that you understand why I did what I did, and that it makes sense, and that it'll be fun for the draft. You could already see what I'm talking about if you have an eagle eye, or you could just be observant. You can see what I did. Mookie Blaylock, number 1 pick of the draft. Mookie is going to go to the Nuggets. He is going to replace Fat Lever, who is most certainly going to get traded in the offseason because the Nuggets are starting to rebuild. And what better way to start a rebuild than to get a good defensive beast of a point guard and Mookie Blaylock, who can also score and play make. So that is a hell of a start for the Nuggets to get him as their number 1 pick. So good on them for drafting him. And yeah, the Nuggets, Alex English getting old, fat lever. He's still a star player, and so they should be able to get a nice return for him by trading him. So yeah, I was worried that they were just going to be in the doldrums for a couple of years as they try to attempt the rebuild. But getting Blaylock with Dan Marley, those are Thunder Dan is a hell of a defensive player. Mookie Blaylock as well. I think they both won Defensive Player of the Year. Glenn Rice, number 2 pick, goes to the Hornets. So Glenn Rice, who really played for the Hornets in the 90s, is actually going to get drafted by them. So that's a nice piece. He's going to be playing with Rod Strickland. And then, okay, the trade I made was between the Heat and the Supersonics. I think I made the right choice here because the Sonics are going to pick Shawn Kemp is going to the Sonics. Thank God. Listen, the Sonics have sucked this entire sim. Let's get them Shawn Kemp and let's see what happens. That's how I feel. And I gave the Heat the 6th and 7th picks, so I think this works out for them. Sean Elliott is going to go to the Phoenix Suns, who play in Arizona, and he played in Arizona. So Sean Elliott to the Suns. He's a hell of a piece. They're going to be really good very soon, I hope. Tim Hardaway to the Nets. Tim Hardaway, a future Hall of Famer, a star, a 5-time All-Star in real life. He's going to go to the Nets. The Nets finally have something good there. Pooh Richardson gets drafted by the Heat. So yeah, I gave them the 6 and 7 picks. I think that's a fair trade. 6 and 7 pick for the 3rd pick because they get Pooh and they get Vlade Divac, who we know ends up being a really good player, Hall of Fame player. So I think that ends up being a great deal. And I think I gave the Heat a future pick as well. Chris Childs goes to the Spurs. Like I said, that pick really belonged to them because it was a lottery protected pick, and they were in the lottery. So Chris Childs is a Spur now. Nick Anderson is a Pacer. I don't know what's happening in my neighborhood right now, but I hear sirens, and I'm sure you hear it too. But let's just try to keep working through this. When I added the Magic and the Wolves, I forgot to make their draft CPU. I forgot to make the CPU handle their drafts, so this is kind of awkward as I choose a prospect, which I did not expect to have to do, which is why I'm initially confused here. I quit. I was like, oh crap, I can't do anything about this. I'm stuck here. All right, I guess I have to choose a prospect because I don't want to change anything thus far. And let's see who the Magic end up picking. I don't like doing. I don't like that I did this. I'll understand if you guys think. I don't know. Who cares, right? I'll just pick the best player available for them. Or do I get creative? What do I do? What do I do? I forget who I pick for them. Blue Edwards, Roy Marble, Stacey King. I think I ended up picking Clifford Robinson. Yeah, that's who I picked. Clifford Robinson, because I know he actually ends up being a good player in the 90s in real life. So I gave them Clifford, and I gave the Wolves Blue Edwards. So those are their picks. And we can get back into the CPU portion of things. Purvis Ellison going to the Clippers. They already have Benoit Benjamin and Moses Malone there. So that definitely clogs the roster with centers. Might signal something that they might have to do in the offseason. Scott Hefner to the Warriors. Danny Ferry to the Jazz, which is kind of on brand for the Jazz. Anthony Cook to the Cavaliers. Jeff Sanders to the Nets. The 76ers will pick... Who did they pick? Ed Horton is going to go to the Philadelphia 76ers. No, I'm not too familiar with him. I don't even know if he played much. I'm pretty sure he's not a generic. So, but yeah, Ed Horton ends up being a Sixer. Let's see who the Atlanta Hawks pick. J.R. Reed. That man I know. I know he played for a number of seasons in the NBA. I think he was mostly a center, though, not power forward. Gary Leonard gets drafted by the Mavericks. Boston Celtics select Stacey King, perhaps the Robert Parrish's replacement at one point down the line, maybe. Roy Marble to the Rockets. Donnie Palmer to the Lakers. So he's going to replace Kareem, maybe. Brian Quinnett to the Knicks. Randy White to the Kings. Doug West to the Nets. They got a couple of picks in the first round. We're still in the first round. So that's a nice pick. They have a couple of nice pickups there. Torgier Bryn. Don't know him. He's on the Bullets now. Dino Raja. I know him. That is a nice pickup for the Blazers. Wow. What a steal by the Blazers. They just won the championship, and they got Dino. We're not going to see much the second round, even though there's some notable names in there. We'll get to that when we go through the offseason and the rosters and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the draft. A lot of interesting results there. And I'll save my thoughts for when we go through all the rosters and stuff. But I love seeing Sean Kemp to the Sonics. I want to be able to jump to Sonics games. I want them to be fun and exciting. We had to make that trade. I'm not going to explain myself any further. So I wanted to give you guys a peek into my process when I do the off season, because this part I feel like is pretty important and something that all of you should know if you do in my league. 2K screws up restricted free agency. If you're a team and your player is a RFA and you try to sign him in the moratorium, the 2K won't acknowledge it. The moratorium will be over, and the player will just take the qualifying offer for some reason. So what I end up doing is I use the moratorium to just sign restricted free agents. So what I do is I have a teams with cap space. I'll have them try to sign a player that's in RFA, and then the original team will match the offer, and then voila, all those players will go back to the original teams with the contracts that they deserve, and we don't have to be worried about any bullshit that 2K tries to pull. So I just want to let you in on that, and that's the reason why I like to control all the teams, and the reason why I have to play a hand in free agency, because 2K screw things up, So if I let the CPU handle all that stuff, then contracts will be completely unrealistic. Michael Jordan will be signed for just a year, and then he'll be a free agent with no bird rights. So that's bad. Can't have that happen. So that's why I do what I do. We're going a little bit out of order here, but here are the expansion draft results. Magic get John Long. Scott Skiles and Alan Level go to the Wolves. Randy Brewer and Vinnie Johnson of the Pistons go to the Magic. Mike Woodson, Walter Berry go to the Wolves. Rory Sparrow, Otis Birdsong to the Magic. Thurl Bailey, John Sally to the Wolves. Jorge Gonzalez, Mike McGee to the Magic. Dan Corzine and T.R. Dunn to the Wolves. Tao Song, Shelton Jones to the Magic. Robert Reed, Kelvin Erickson to the Wolves. Grant Long, Jeremy Nelson to the Magic. Ricky Green, Steve Johnson to the Wolves. And Rolando Ferreira to the Magic. I think that's it. So yeah, that's the expansion draft. Not all these guys are going to remain on these teams, but I did want to show you this expansion draft because I blew it the previous season. All that footage was deleted. Let's get into some transactions, some trades that were made during the offseason that I felt were either important or necessary, or trades that are based on trades that really happened in the 1989 offseason. So let's go through it. I'm just going to read it through the first time, and then when we go through rosters, I'll explain myself a little bit more. And I'll note the ones that were based on actual trades. So the Clippers, this is a big one. They traded Moses Malone to the Mavericks. The Mavericks received Kenny Walker, 2 first-round picks, Merlin Wiley, and then later on, I decided to add Jeff Hornacek to that deal, and with Rex Chapman going to the Mavericks. So again, I'll explain myself in more detail when we talk about those teams. But yeah, that's that trade. This trade is based on real life. Terry Cummings is no longer a Milwaukee Buck. He went to the Spurs. In real life, he actually was traded to the Spurs in this offseason. And the Spurs, though, they had Alvin Robertson. So they traded Terry Cummings for Alvin Robertson, who was an all-star. That can't happen this time around, obviously, because they don't have Robertson. So instead, they traded a bunch of young players, Del Curry, Wayman Tisdale, Chris Childs, who they just drafted, and Jose Vargas. And they added a 1990 first-round pick. This is another trade that happened in real life, although the details are slightly altered. Maurice Cheeks has been traded to the Spurs. I don't remember exactly what the details were in real life, but in this version, I did Maurice Cheeks and John Drew to the Spurs in exchange for Norwood Barber, Brad Sellers, Jaren Jackson, and 2 second-round picks. So that's that trade. And then this is another big one. This is another big one. Danny Ainge traded from the Celtics to the Suns for Sarunas Marciulionis, Donald Royal, Darwin Cook, and 2 first-round picks. This is a big one. And listen, Danny Ainge was traded in real life by the Celtics during the 1989 season, mid-season, and he was traded to the Sacramento Kings, which obviously in this reality, there's no real reason for the Kings to get Danny Ainge. They won 56 games. They have Allen Robertson. They're happy at shooting guard. I thought this would be a great alternate choice because Danny Ainge actually did play for the Suns in real life in the 90s. So I thought that was a good reason to do it. And I like the idea of Sarunas Marciulionis going to the Celtics and becoming like the future shooting guard for them. And they add some depth with Donald Royal and Darwin Cook and 2 first-round picks. That's pretty big for the Celtics to have that. So we'll get into more of that later. Uh, Here's another big one. Fat Lever, who I hinted at before. Fat Lever has been traded from the Denver Nuggets, who are in a rebuild officially. He's going to go to the Golden State Warriors. Here's what the Golden State Warriors did. They gave up Gerald Wilkins, Charles Smith, and Johnny Dawkins, a second-round pick and a lottery-protected first-round pick in 1990 in exchange for Fat Lever. I like this. I like this deal. Fat Lever in real life in the 1990 offseason was traded to the Mavericks. Obviously, that's not something that we would do here because they have Derek Harper. There's really no reason to do that. And Fat Lever is an 87 overall, too. I don't know if I can show you that now, but he's still a really good player in this sim. And so the Warriors could really use him. So that is why that trade happened. The Warriors, I mean, the Nuggets, their return, man, we'll get more into that when we talk about the Nuggets, but I really like what this ends up doing for the Nuggets. And then we have another big trade. This one is more of a fantasy, I guess. Doc Rivers, J.R. Reed, Avery Johnson are going to go to the Rockets. Ralph Sampson and Gus Williams to the Hawks. This is a big one. I'm going to save my thoughts on this later, but yes, this is another big one. And then we have so many big trades. So this is all this one you could understand, right? Adrian Dantley and a 1993 first round pick are going to go to the Nuggets in exchange for Alex English and Reggie Theus. So English and Theus are going to go to the Pistons. Adrian Dantley goes to the Nuggets temporarily. And this is the alternate choice. You see, the Pistons in the 1989 mid-season in real life, they traded for Mark Aguirre. Like I said before, that can't happen in this reality because Mark Aguirre is a champion of the Mavericks. So instead, the Pistons get Alex English. We'll see how that works out for them. They made the finals last year. Can Alex English push them over the top? And Reggie Theus off the bench, could that be the nudge that the Pistons need to actually win the finals? We'll see. I'm really curious about that one. And then the Nuggets, they have no interest in Adrian Dantley because they're in a rebuild. They promptly traded Adrian Dantley to the 76ers for another first-round pick and Norwood Barber. So the Nuggets now have two young point guards in Barber and Mookie Blaylock. They get yet another first-round pick. And Adrian Dantley goes to the 76ers, who I always felt like they needed a scoring forward. They needed a forward who is a volume scorer. Adrian Dantley is starting to decline a little bit, which was another reason why I traded him away from the Pistons. But he's still good enough that I think he could be a real contributor for the 76ers. Then we had this. As I was going through the rosters, I realized, the Bullets could really use John Sally. Let's bring him back. So John Sally's back on the Bullets, and they traded Bryn and 2 second-rounders to the Wolves in exchange. So the Wolves got some extra assets. And then the Wolves traded Alan Level to the Cavaliers for Kurt Rambis. This might not be all that equal. Maybe I should add a second-round pick to that one. Maybe. I might do that. Although I don't think the Cavaliers have any second-round picks. So listen, the Wolves are supposed to suck. So let's just let them suck. All right, let's just agree the Wolves are supposed to suck right now, and that they're an expansion team, and Allen Level is still a good contributor. He can contribute to a good team, and so he goes to the Cavs. And then we had John Long traded away from the Cavs, or away from the Magic to the Cavs for Franklin Edwards and second round picks. So there's another trade. And then I had a trade between the Celtics and the Magic. The Celtics traded Fred Roberts to the Magic for Otis Birdsong and two second round picks. So that's a pretty interesting one. We have this is another big one. Tom Chambers and Jay Vincent from the Clippers are going to be traded to the Jazz for Danny Ferry, Gene Banks, and two first round picks. I have a really good reason for this. You'll understand it as I get into those teams. That's a big one. Sadell Threat is going to go to the Clippers in exchange for Keith Edmondson and two second round picks, which I'll get into later too. Randy Brewer traded from the Magic to the Hawks for Leonard Woolridge and a second round pick. And then we have Mac Madsen, two second round picks going to the Hornets for Ennis Watley. Mac Madsen isn't even a real player, I don't think. And so I also felt like the Jazz could use some depth at point guard. So that's a reason to do that trade. And then this one's kind of, I don't know if this is a big deal. Walter Davis, Dyron Nix, and three second round picks for Jerry Sisting and Jeff Turner. I'm really trying to get the Suns into the playoffs this season. So really shoring up their bench. And then this is part of that Mavericks Clippers trade that I talked about before. And then this one, I don't know if this one's going to do anything, but I was trying to shore up the Spurs bench by giving them Mike Kaminsky, Doug West, and Tim Perry, and exchange for Michael Ansley, Ben Guillory, and two second round picks. So those are the trades. So let's check out all the rosters now after all these trades and all the moves have been done. This is what the Heat look like. The Heat, Pooh Richardson is going to be the starting point guard. Winston Garland, who averaged 20 points per game, or 18 points per game for the Heat. So he's back. He's going to be the starting shooting guard. You got Kenny Green, Lorenzo Charles, and Vlade Divac as their starting center. So both Pooh and Vlade are going to be the starters. And this is an interesting young team. With these two rookies, the Heat are starting to become a little bit interesting. Larry Drew will come off the bench for them. Steve Stepanovich as well. Dave Greenwood, Javon Cage, who I think is a generic, and Benji Wilson, who they drafted last year. Jay Edwards, and they got Harvey Grant, who needs to progress soon. He's actually turns out to be a good player in real life, so I got to make sure that he actually gets bumped up at some point. We'll see if the Heat can improve from last year where they only won 11 games. Charlotte Hornets, this is what their lineup looks like. Rod Strickland, Kelly Tribuca moves to shooting guard to make way for Glenn Rice. So that's going to be an interesting backcourt with Glenn Rice being the small forward, a great shooter he is. You got Sidney Green and Tito Horford in their front court, which is not great, and that's probably going to make them lose a lot of games. But there's some promising players here. Glenn Rice and Rod Strickland, obviously, and they got Kelly Tribuca, who's starting to decline a little bit, but he's still a big contributor for them. Manute Bol, James Edwards off the bench. David Thompson is here. AJ Winder, Alfred Hughes. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Johnny Newman's down here. So I figure with these guys, Bol, Edwards, and David Thompson, Bol we might actually keep on the Hornets. I actually like him on the Hornets because he's, I don't know, but his field. This is the problem with Bol. He can't shoot. His field goal percentage is horrible in this game. I don't know why, but I'd rather keep him on an expansion team that's developing than to actually have him be a backup center on a team that's trying to compete. And he just keeps missing shots and making that team worse. You know what I mean? So yeah, but James Edwards might be a good contributor for a playoff team. David Thompson as well. So it'd be nice if they can trade those guys during the middle of the season and add some assets. So that's something to look into with the Hornets. But other than that, interesting young team that's growing. So we'll see what happens with them. Here are the Magic. So the Magic, they have Rory Sparrow, Vinny Microwave Johnson is starting for them. They got Mike McGee, Fred Roberts, Chris Washburn. So other than Washburn, who is what, 24, this is mostly a veteran team. I'm actually curious about this to see how this is going to work out. All these guys are in their 30s. You got Jorge Gonzalez, who was on the Lakers. He's the sixth man here. Orlando Woolridge, Harold Presley, who is, I don't know what his deal is. I don't know what Harold Presley's deal is. And then you have Franklin Edwards, Dano Barros, Dana Barros. Did I say Dano? Dana Barros, who I know in real life played for a number of seasons. So he's actually a sneaky, interesting player deep down this bench. Clifford Robinson as well. These guys should get better over the course of the season. They have Vinny Del Negro down here, Shelton Jones, and Grant Long. Grant Long, I gotta boost him. Either he is supposed to be a really good player, at least an 80 overall, at some point during the early 90s. So I got to make sure that I do that for him in this sim because it'd be a shame to have him waste away at the end of the bench for the Magic. So we'll fix him. Maybe next off season we'll fix him, or maybe I'll fix him before the season starts. I don't know, but yeah, this is the Magic. The Wolves, B.J. Armstrong, who they drafted in the second round, is their starting point guard, which I think is interesting. But you got Scott Skiles is here as well, who really is he really should be their point guard. But it just so happens they drafted B.J. Armstrong, and they got Scott Skiles in the expansion draft. So we might do something about this over the course of the season. Maybe next offseason we'll streamline this because I think I'd rather have Skiles be their starting point guard, but we'll see. Mike Woodson is a small forward. Walter Berry, power forward. Torgier Bryn with that trade with the Bullets. He's now their starting center. They got Kevin Gamble. Thurl Bailey off the bench. You would think he'd be a viable starter, but he's on the bench. Blue Edwards also on the bench. They drafted him. Kurt Rambis. Kurt Rambis on the Wolves is fun. Steve Johnson is here as well. Ricky Green. Dave Corzine, no longer on the Bulls. T.R. Dunn. So a lot of interesting veterans on this team as well. I'm thinking for the Wolves. I'm thinking Thurl Bailey might be a guy they'll want to trade at some point because he's got a lot of value as a backup power forward in the league. So they might be able to get some second round picks from him. Here are the Sixers. Nate McMillan is now the point guard there. He's an 82 overall point guard. Andrew Toney has declined a little bit, but he's still the starting shooting guard at 86 overall. You get Adrian Dantley, who still can score, still a hell of a scorer, but he's also declining just a little bit. But I always felt like the Sixers could use a scoring forward, and so I'm really curious to see what he's able to do for the Sixers, even at age 33. You got Roy Hinson, who's only 28, still. I moved him to power forward because look what happens with his overall jumps quite a bit at power forward. He was originally small forward, but if you look here, I mean he goes from 88 to 90. So I'm really curious to see what he looks like as the power forward for the Sixers. And of course Sam Bowie's the center. Sam Perkins coming off the bench. We'll see how things go if the Sixers are really really good this season. We'll just keep things like this, but I'm sure he's not too happy to be relegated to being a bench player, six-man role. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. The bench kind of drops off after that. Norm Nixon is here. He's declining quite a bit. Vernon Maxwell, he's progressing. So Vernon Maxwell is now on the rotation. You got Vincent Eskew. You got Brad Sellers on the bench. And then Ed Horton, Billy Thompson, Will Perdue, Jaren Jackson. So not a bad bench. It definitely drops off after Sam Perkins. Very curious about the Sixers. Very curious to see how they do in 1990. You know, they're starting to McMillan here. Maxwell eventually should be starter caliber. So eventually the backcourt should be McMillan and Maxwell in a few years. But then by then Roy Hinson might be in his 30s and Sam Bowie would be in his early 30s. So this is a lot of interesting stuff going on with the Sixers. You know, they Should they trade Perkins at some point? I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things going on with the Sixers, but I really like what they've done with their team. It's a really interesting mix of young players and veterans. As we move on to the Bucks, another interesting team. Sidney Moncrief is still there at point guard. Ricky Pierce has progressed a bit. He's the starting shooting guard. Paul Pressey at small forward. And you have Wyman Tisdale from the Spurs trade. He's how old is he? He's 25. So he adds some youth to the team. Everyone else is like in their 30s. And Jack Sigma is declining a little bit, but he's still an 86 overall. You got Del Curry off the bench. Sam Mitchell was signed as a free agent. And then you got Willie Anderson off the bench as well. Scotty Brooks might be the point guard of the future. Maybe. He's only 23. You got Jose Vargas down here. George Johnson. Danny Young. Chris Childs. Jim Farmer. So I don't know. They only won 30 games last season, maybe even less than that. But on paper, this looks like a team that could make the playoffs. Maybe with Terry Cummings on the Spurs now, maybe that allows Jack Sigma to take more of an offensive role. Because if you look at on the Sonics, he was averaging 19 points per game. Then he joins the Bucks, and his scoring dips quite a bit. Maybe that could change now that he's gonna get most of the touches in the post. You got Tisdale here, doesn't score much. Pretty big year for the Bucks. Can they make the playoffs again? Can they make some noise, or is it time to think about Moncrief leaving the Bucks? Could this be Moncrief's last year as a Buck? Could it be Pressey's? Is it time to rebuild? Is it time to rebuild in Milwaukee? That's going to be a big question as this season plays out. We'll see. We'll see if that's something that needs to be done. The Bullets, they're running it back. John Stockton, Jeff Malone, Xavier McDaniel, Jeff Ruin, Cliff Robinson. This has been the team for a couple of seasons now. Reggie Lewis off the bench, Terry Catledge, David Rivers, John Sally, Lester Connor. Almost no changes at all. Like this team has been the team for a while. Uh, but this could be a make or break season because you got Cliff Robinson at 29, Ruin is 30, and so you got to ask yourself, Ruin is starting to decline a little bit. How many more years can you put up with this? They won 62 games last season, right? 63, and they lost in the second round. They got swept by the Celtics. So this is kind of a put up or shut up year for them. Like, if they don't, if they can't make the conference finals or the finals this year, do they have to do something about Rulin or Cliff Robinson? Do they have to get younger? Does the front court have to get younger? Like McDaniel's 26, Malone is 28, Stockton is 27. I don't know, but I feel like even though they're running it back this year, I feel like if there's another disappointment in the playoffs for them in 1990, maybe some changes need to be made. We'll see. But for now, they are who they are. You got the Bulls. Darrell Walker is starting for some reason. I want John Paxson to start, but I might do something about that. Uh, I might trade Darrell Walker, although I don't know. He's doing pretty solid for them. So maybe I'll keep this like this for now. Darrell Walker's a starter. I guess John Paxson is not shooting too well for the Bulls, which is not great. I don't know how to fix that. If he's not shooting well, he's not shooting well. But he in real life he wasn't this bad. So what the hell? But you got Darrell Walker, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen has progressed, Horace Grant, Bill Cartwright, John Paxson, Ed Pinckney, Craig Hodges off the bench, Eddie Johnson still here, and Wayne Cooper, who they got from the Nuggets. And yeah, so hey, is this team going to improve already? Are they going to be a 50-win team at least? In real life, they win the championship in '91. This is 1990, so I'll be patient. But I just hope I hope they get off to a really good start, and I hope they're a top 4 seed, because otherwise it's like, what's going on here? This is the team. I mean, Darrell Walker shouldn't be starting. He should be on John Paxson. I guess I can change that right now, right? But like, even if I bring it back to this, like, even with Darrell Walker starting, like they should still be a really damn good team. And last year they won 44 games. So really don't understand what's going on with them. But maybe now that Scottie Pippen has progressed and Horace Grant as well, maybe the Bulls can make it past the first round. Maybe they can win 50 games, 55 games. We'll see. Hopefully this team, I'm hoping, ends up actually being good. The Cavs are looking real fun. They're running it back too, and I don't blame them. Mark Price progressing still. Reggie Miller, 91 overall now. Anthony Mason, 81 overall. Larry Nance, Kevin Duckworth, John Long, Alan Level, who they got from that trade with the Wolves, I think, right? Albert King is still here. Tree Rollins is still here. Anthony Cook, the rookie. And they got some bench players. This team could be really good this season. They won 43 games last year. They can win 50. They could go to the conference finals. This team looks really, really fun, and I can't wait to see how they end up doing. They got some shooters. They got great defenders with Nance and Duckworth, and Mason is kind of a wild card. He kind of does a little bit of everything. So I'm really looking forward to the Cavs this year. They this is a playoff team, a perennial playoff team now. They were terrible all throughout the 80s until they drafted Mark Price and Reggie Miller, and now things have really started to turn around for them, which is really cool. So that's cool for the Cavs. The Celtics, they're different now a little bit. I mean, you still got Dennis Johnson, who is now 35. Larry Bird is 32. Kim McHale is 31. Robert Parrish is 36. So these guys are starting to get a bit old. Parrish is starting to decline a little bit. Bird and McHale a tiny bit as well. But they got young 25-year-old Sarunas Marciulionis starting for the team. So I'm really curious to see what he brings to the Celtics. And obviously, Danny Ainge left in a trade to the Suns. They got Darwin Cook as their backup point. Got Roy Tarpley still here. Donald Royal from the Suns trade. Joe Wolf. Joe Wolf. Wow, Joe Wolf pretty good off the bench for the Celtics. You got Mario Ellie. Didn't actually play last year for the Celtics, but now he's going to be on the rotation. Stacey King. Otis Birdsong's on the bench. Greg Hubbard. Rob Williams. So, yeah, I mean, the bench is pretty solid. They got some young players in here. Mario Ellie's 25. Stacey King is 22. Donald Royal's 23. So young bench pieces. Cook is 31, so he's not quite part of that. But they got some young bench pieces to go along with the veteran aging squad. And yeah, we're seeing the Celtics. Maybe they're starting their decline now. They kind of started it last season when they lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll see if they decline even further than that, or do they have another Conference Finals run in them? Do they have another deep playoff run in them? Can they make a deep playoff run without Danny Ainge? Can Barcelona signal a future for the Celtics that's bright? We'll see. We'll see with the Celtics. They should still be really good, but I don't know how deep in the playoffs they'll go this year. Then we got the Clippers. The Clippers, Jay Humphries, Sadell Threat, Kenny Walker, Gene Banks, Benoit Benjamin. They got Marquez Johnson off the bench, who I think they'll also trade, as well as Darnell Valentine. They probably will trade him too. Jeff Hornacek, who should eventually be their starter. Purvis Ellison, Danny Ferry, Merlon Wiley, Brian Shaw, Kevin Carter. So yeah, this team they traded away Moses Malone. They traded away Tom Chambers. They don't have their own pick in 1990. So the Sixers actually they have their pick. So yeah, the Sixers have the Clippers pick, and the Clippers did okay. They have 3 first-round picks in 1990, and then they have the Jazz first-round pick in 1992. So like, yeah, the Sixers are probably going to benefit from the Clippers probably being bad this year. But the Clippers are going to be okay. They're not. It's not a disaster. They managed to get themselves Hornacek, who's going to be a great player for them in the future. Purvis Ellison, as long as he's not hurt and injuries are off, so he won't be hurt. He should be good for them in the future as well. And Benoit Benjamin is a really solid player, at least in the sim. So we'll see if they really are that bad. They might not be that bad this year. They might not be that bad. We'll see. But if they are, they have 3 first-round picks next year, and hopefully they can either like use those in trades, or they can get some good young players next year to really start their rebuild. So yeah, but they might miss the play. They might be bad. This might be a bad team, but we'll see. We'll see if that actually ends up being the case. We got the Hawks. Now this team, the reason why they traded Doc Rivers, Mark Jackson. Look how Mark Jackson has progressed over the last year or so. 86 overall. He's shooting well from the field. Not a great three-point shooter yet, but great free throw percentage, great field goal percentage. His career per 36 stats indicate he should be a really good scorer for them. You got Rolando Blackman as a shooting guard. You got Dominique Wilkins. Kevin Willis now is at power forward. And Ralph Sampson! Ralph Sampson is going to be the starting center for the Hawks. This had to happen. Why? Because when we were jumping to Rockets games, we weren't seeing Sampson. It feels like the Rockets are 100% Olajuwon's team. And it feels like Sampson deserves to shine on his own. Be his own man. Go to the Hawks. And now the Hawks could really do some damage in the East. They won 48 games last year, and they got better. They lost Mike Mitchell in the offseason, but they got Ralph Sampson now. Gus Williams off the bench. Antoine Carr still here. Randy Brewer. John Williams. Danny Vrains. Tony Campbell. This team should be really good. They should be really, really good. Top 4 team possibility in the East. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do. And when we jump into games, Ralph Sampson's going to dominate. He is. So that should be a lot of fun. We're in the Dominique Wilkins era. This is Dominique's best chance to really make a deep run in the playoffs. So I'm hoping to see that. It's about time. Moving on to the Jazz. What's been fun about the Jazz, if you look at their team history, they've only missed the playoffs once. They made the playoffs. So they made the Western Conference Finals here. Made the playoffs here, here, here. You see this decline here, 48 wins, 41 wins, 39 wins, and then they kind of bottomed out here with 26 wins. But now they're back up to a 500 team, and their team, I think, is pretty good this year. Michael Adams is now at 87 overall. Daryl Griffith has slid a bit to 82, but you got Hershey Hawkins right here on the come up, and eventually he's going to surpass him, maybe during the season. Chuck Person, Tom Chambers now is on the Jazz. Now, why is he on the Jazz? Because he only has 1 year left in his deal, and it just felt like the Clippers were declining. Moses Malone was declining. You can kind of see the tea leaves for the Clippers, and I just felt like Tom Chambers would not want to stay with the Clippers if they're going to be starting a rebuild. So, and the Jazz really had a need for a power forward. So they got a huge upgrade. They gave up some draft picks and a couple players for Tom Chambers. And now Tom Chambers, he was having to share the ball in the post with Moses Malone. That's not going to happen this time because Mark Eaton doesn't score. He doesn't want the ball. Mark Eaton does not care about scoring. So you're going to have Tom Chambers, who a great scorer, and Mark Eaton is just going to be like, "Go ahead, man. You score. I'll be ready for the rebound if you miss." So yeah, they got a lot of great 3-point shooting on this team, and so I expect a lot of big things from the Jazz. This should be their best season since the first season of the Sim. The Kings, now the Kings, I mean, they're just getting better and better. They're running it back, but all their players are still pretty young. KJ Johnson at 23, he's 85 overall. Alvin Robinson's still only 27, he's at an 89 overall. Chris Mullin is 26, he's at 92. Otis Thorpe 27, 84. And you got Arvydas Sabonis only 25. He's progressing every year. He's now 87 overall. They got Reggie Williams off the bench. They signed Daryl Dawkins from free agency. John Sonvald is back. Craig Ello is back. They got Raphael Addison, Calvin Nat. This team is just a beast. They're a beastie team. They won 56 games last season, and they could win 60. I mean, this team could win the they could win the championship. They really could. This roster is crazy. Here are the Knicks. They're running it back. Sleepy Floyd, Al Wood, Bernard King, Charles Oakley, Patrick Ewing, Frank Bukowski's on the bench, Bart Kofod, Keith Lee, Kyle Macy, Buck Johnson. They won 54 games last year. I keep expecting the team to go in a downward slope, and they keep surprising me. They lost to the Pistons in round two, but the Pistons made it to the finals, so you can't really blame them for that. I mean, we'll see how good this team could be this year, because the East has improved big time, and so we'll see if the Knicks can keep up. The Lakers, interesting stuff here. Magic Johnson, Michael Cooper, James Worthy, AC Green, so they're all back. You got Joe Barry Carroll, who has taken over for Kareem, Byron Scott, Michael Thompson, Wes Matthews, Kerry Scurry, Mike Giommi. So the big note here is Joe Barry Carroll uh, being their starting center now. He was on the Mavericks for a year last season, and he could not resist the bright lights of LA. So now he's on the Lakers. If you have a chance to be the starting center for the Lakers, you take that chance. So, but the Lakers keep disappointing us. I'm not quite sure just how good they're going to be this season, especially with no Kareem, and Michael Thompson is declining. So, how good is this team really? They can win 60 games. I'm sure they'll win at least 50 games. They might be a top five team in the East, or I mean in the West, I should say. But will they make a deep playoff run? I don't know. I don't know anymore with this team. The Dallas Mavericks, man, they could win 70 games. Just check this out. Derek Harper, 88. Joe Dumars, 93. Mark Aguirre, Charles Barkley, Moses Malone, all 90 overalls. Now, they traded for Moses Malone because Joe Barry Carroll left, and they gave up a lot of pieces. So their bench isn't all that great. Brad Davis, James Donaldson, Cedric Maxwell, who's old now. He's 33. They got Tyrone Corbin, Rex Chapman from that Clippers trade, and that's pretty much it. But I mean, this starting five is just so solid. It's worth the risk of not having a great bench to have a starting five like this. Moses Malone is here. Charles Barkley, Mark Aguirre, Joe Dumars, Derek Harper. This team should be pretty sick. But if it turns out they're not also all too great, it could be the bench because this bench is not good. But this is the sacrifice that you make when you trade for Moses Malone. So we'll see how things go for the Mavericks. But I think they could win a lot of games, and they might win the finals. They might go all the way. I mean, this team is just the starting five is just way too good. The Nets, the Nets are finally approaching competence. Tim Hardaway, Chris Morris, Andrew Kennedy, Armin Gilliam, Hot Rod Williams. Got John Bagley off the bench now. Charles Shackelford, Jeff Sanders, George McLeod, Ben Guillory, Jeff Grayer. This is mostly a team full of young players. If you check out their roster, I mean, everyone here. The oldest player is 29, John Bagley, and he might get traded over the course of the season. He might. I don't know. Everyone is 23 or younger. Everyone else, a really young team, but they're starting to put it together. They're finally starting to put it together. Tim Hardaway, of course, helps. They're still going to be a lottery team for a while. I'm sure of it. But yeah, this team should at least be competent. They're on their way. It feels like things are progressing positively for the Nets. They have a star player in the making, Tim Hardaway, and Chris Morris is a solid player. They got Armin Gilliam is also solid. So they got some solid pieces here. Finally feels like things might come together for the Nets this season. So the Nuggets are another team that's rebuilding, but it looks like the rebuild is taking shape quite quickly. You got Mookie Blaylock, Dan Marley, Gerald Wilkins, Charles Smith, Danny Shays starting, Cliff Livingston off the bench, Herb Williams off the bench. Johnny Dawkins. Norwood Barber. World Be Free is here. Ken Norman. This team, Walter Davis on the bench. This team, obviously no one here is a star yet, right? But this is a really good rebuild team, like a really good development team, right? Like Blaylock's going to be good eventually. Marley's on his way. Charles Smith, this team can make the playoffs in a couple of years for sure. And the Pacers, no excuses, guys. You guys got to make the playoffs this year. Enough nonsense. You got John Paxson, Mitch Richmond, Drazen Petrovic at 89 overall, Carmelo at 95 overall, LaSalle Thompson, Quentin Daly, Johnny Moore, Blair Rasmussen, who was on the Mavericks for a number of years, Nick Anderson off the bench, Johnny Davis, George Money. Not only could this team they won 36 games last season. I could see this team winning 60 games based on this roster. Come on. So no excuses this year, guys. You guys got to make the playoffs. Pistons. Isaiah Thomas, Ron Harper, Alex English, Dennis Rodman, Bill Laimbeer. That's their starting five. You got Alex English now. Alex English is their small forward. Look at this. He's still scoring. He's declining a little bit, but not that much. He's 35, but he's a hell of a player. What Mark Aguirre was to the Pistons in real life, that's what Alex English could be for the Pistons in the sim. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. Rick Mahorn's off the bench. Reggie Theus is here. Still an efficient scorer. Terry Teagle is here. Sam Vincent, they got from free agency. Joe Klein is still here. Pearl Washington's back. Rory White. No one else of note. But yeah, this team could easily make it back to the finals. And they can win 65 games for all I know. But yeah, looking forward to that. The Rockets. So this is what the Rockets look like now. After that Ralph Sampson trade, Doc Rivers, Lewis Lloyd is still here, perfect short. Rodney McRae is now starting. Akeem Olajuwon. And you got Vern Fleming, Roy Marble, Greg Anderson, Steve Coulter, Avery Johnson, J.R. Reed, Bill Wennington down here too. So this team might take a step back. I kind of want to just see what they look like without Ralph Sampson, and then we'll see what adjustments need to be made to the Rockets over the next year or so. Obviously, the goal is to have Olajuwon have a championship team by the mid-'90s, just to reflect real life. But for now, I expect them to take a step back. They should still make the playoffs, but maybe they win like 45 games or 44 games. Or maybe Doc Rivers elevates them. I don't know. I really don't know what to expect from the Rockets at all. The Spurs, they're a veteran team mostly now. So Cummings and Robinson, that's a hell of a front court. You got Jerome Kersey, Barry and Cheeks. You got John Drew off the bench, Jeff Houston, Mike Kaminsky, Derek Chivas, John Koncak, and Doug West. I am not wild about the Spurs bench. They could use some improvements here. For example, if the Nuggets end up being really terrible, I could see World Be Free getting traded to this team. But we'll keep an eye on this team, see if they need some help. Suns. Look what has happened to the Suns. Kenny Smith, Danny Ainge, Mike Mitchell, Danny Manning, Brad Doherty. You got Jerry Sisting off the bench, Alton Lister, Jeff Turner, Keith Edmondson, and Sean Elliott, who eventually will be their starter. But for now, you got Mike Mitchell in his place. So this team, they won 24 games last year. I expect big things from this team. The Sonics, I still think they're a work in progress. Spud Webb, Dale Ellis is still here. Derek McKee, Sean Kemp is now on the Sonics. He's the power forward. Alden Polynice, Rick Smits. I eventually want Rick Smits to start. This is getting kind of awkward. Polynice, he was really good for them, though. really efficient, and Rick Smits was really inefficient, which I don't understand why he was that bad, but we'll see how that goes. Michael Williams is here, Michael Cage, Dennis Hobson, Todd Lichty. Yeah, this is not a this is still a lottery team. Uh, some moves need to be made. I think Michael Cage. It's not really working out here. I don't think he had a bad season by his standards. And then Rick Smith's like I don't know. Like he was a top 5 pick and he's starting to look like a bust. I don't like that. He was a solid starter for the Pacers in real life, and so I want to monitor that and make sure he doesn't end up. Uh, he should be better than this, right? So we'll see how that goes. So that's the Sonics. Here are the Blazers. They're running it back. Terry Porter, Clyde Drexler, Kiki Vandeweghe, Buck Williams, Tim McCormick, Clark Kellogg, Nate Blackwell. Not much changes at all here. Cody Carr, Clint Richardson. The big one is Dino Raja. Now he should eventually be their starting center in a couple of years, and that should be exciting because I know he was a good player in Europe, and he had some nice years in the Celtics in the mid '90s. So the Blazers, the target is on their back. They are the defending champions. Can they get back there? Can they win another one? I don't know, but they still have all the pieces. They have all the tools they need to do it. We'll see if they actually can pull it off. The Warriors, Fat Lever, John Starks, Len Bias, Detlef Shrimp, Ronnie Cycli. Got Muggsy Bogues off the bench now. George Gervin off the bench. William Bedford, Jose Antonio Montero, and Larry Smith. Who's that? Terry Davis. Yeah, Charles Davis is here too. This team, I think 55 wins. This team could make it to 50, 55 wins. They have the squad to make that kind of run. Maybe I'm being overly zealous. Maybe they're a 45, 48 win team, but definitely a playoff team now. Fat Lever really solidifies things for them. Uh, Solidifies their backcourt with John Starks as well. So yeah, I really like this team, and it's funny to see how far they've come. That rebuild they did. I mean, they already had Len Bias before I broke their team down. It wasn't that hard to rebuild around a guy like Len Bias, but they got Detlef Shrimp and Muggsy Bogues from that trade for Purvis Short, or the Purvis Short trade, I should say. And they got a lot of picks that turned into John Starks, Ronnie Cycli. Who else? That's about it, actually. And John Starks. Who else did they draft? Oh, Charles Smith, who's on the Nuggets now. So yeah, and that pick ended up being Fat Lever. So yeah, the Warriors look good. If we look at the teams like this, I'd say the Jazz are a playoff team. The Kings, the Lakers, the Mavericks, the Spurs, the Suns, the Blazers. That's 7. Rockets, Warriors. So I see 9 potential playoff teams here. Right? Jazz, Kings, Lakers, Mavericks, Spurs, Suns, Blazers, Rockets. Yeah, I see 9 potential playoff teams, and the rest are going to be struggling. The Clippers included. So that's going to be interesting to see how the West shakes out. And if you look at the Eastern Conference, I mean, this one I could see a lot of these teams making the playoffs. Sixers, Bucks, Bullets, Bulls, Cavs, Celtics, the Knicks, the Pacers, the Pistons, the Hawks. That's I mean, only the Heat, the Nets, and the Magic. I would say are definitely not playoff teams. Other than that, there are 10 possible teams in the East that I think could make the playoffs. So you got 9 here that are possibilities, 10 here. So 19 teams out of 27. That's pretty damn good. This league is in really good shape for the 1990 season. I am looking forward to seeing how things shake out. In the next video, we're going to check out the expansion teams and the teams with the rookies. So uh, Tim Hardaway, Sean Kemp, etc. So we'll check out the young teams. We'll check out the expansion teams in the next video. We look forward to that. This is 90 Sports Gamer. Peace.